0 plus 5 seconds.
Liftoff normal.
Here
tracking.
we have a majestic liftoff of LVM-3 M4 rocket carrying India's prestigious Chandrayaan-3 spacecraft.
P2 tracking.
प्रज्वलन और सफलतापूर्ण उत्थापन LVM-3 M4 रॉकेट का। यह भीमकाय रॉकेट आसमान को चीरते हुए अपनी भयानक दहाड़ से चारों ओर कंपन उत्पन्न कर रहा है। इसे हम यहाँ महसूस कर सकते हैं और यही दहाड़ है जो वैज्ञानिकों को रोमांचित करती है।
Hello there, you're watching our special show on Chandrayaan-3. I'm Maha Siddiqui. India's Chandrayaan-3 is headed to the moon. A successful launch from Sriharikota in Andhra Pradesh, carrying the hopes of an entire nation. If successful, the mission will make India the fourth country to achieve a controlled landing on the moon after Russia, the United States and China. The moon lander Vikram is perched on a Mark III heavy lift launch vehicle dubbed the Bahubali rocket. The journey from Earth to the moon for the spacecraft is estimated to take about a month, and the landing is expected on August 23rd. Upon landing, it will operate for 1 lunar day, which is approximately 14 Earth days. 1 day on the moon is equal to 14 days on Earth. Before we get down to discussing this launch with our guests here, let me first go across to the special conversation and exclusive conversation that NDTV had with Union Minister Jitendra Singh, who was present at the launch today, and he spoke exclusively with NDTV.
No, of course, as I said, even in the brief remarks that I made over there, it's a moment of glory for India, and Team ISRO has made India proud. At the same time, it's been possible because of the enabling milieu provided by Prime Minister Modi. We had no dearth of talent over here. We have seen the times when Vikram and his colleagues would carry the launch vehicle on the carriage of the bicycle. They were so much devoid of resources, but they had tremendous amount of confidence, faith in their capacities, and that outlet was provided after Prime Minister Modi took over. Number of decisions taken, the synergism between the public and the private sector, the opening up of the gates of Sriharikota, all that has brought all the stakeholders together to pool their resources and pool all that they have to contribute to the march of the events.
Joining us now to discuss the successful launch of Chandrayaan-3, NDTV's Pallav Bagla joining me here in the studio. Somak Ray Chaudhary, Vice Chancellor Ashoka University and astrophysicist, D. Raghunandan, Delhi Science Forum, from the Delhi Science Forum, and Dr. Amitav Ghosh, NASA scientist. Prajwal Shastri, a senior astrophysicist, will also be joining us shortly. Pallav, I want to come first to you because I want you to break down this launch for us to simplify the journey over the next 40 days and what possible challenges are we expecting?
Well, the challenge has just begun. The most risky part is to cross the atmosphere of Earth, and the launch vehicle Mark III gave a precise launch. The orbit which has been achieved is so good. It will help preserve fuel on the propulsion module so that the life of the propulsion module and Vikram lander would be longer. Now, Chandrayaan-3 is in the orbit of Earth. It will take several rotations around the Earth. Its orbit will be nudged higher and higher as days go by ISRO, and then one fine day it will be nudged to the moon to cover the 3,84,000 kilometers to the moon. There, the moon's gravity has to catch Chandrayaan, take Chandrayaan-3 in its own embrace, a very tricky test indeed. If we miss that, then it becomes a flyby mission and it goes into the solar system lost forever. But hopefully all these steps have been learnt. Then it goes around the moon, takes several rotations, then the orbit is slowly reduced to a circular 100-kilometer orbit. Then one fine day in August, hopefully August 23rd, the propulsion module and the Vikram lander separate, and the Vikram Lander starts its journey to put India's flag on the moon's surface. Once that happens, what I am looking forward to is getting the first selfies from the Vikram Lander to the rover and the rover to the Vikram Lander. So selfies from the lunar surface with India's flag on it would be an amazing sight.
Absolutely.
And I really am looking forward to that. And all this will happen in an area which I have named Kalam Bihar. That is the area, the 2.5 into 4 kilometer, 10 square kilometer area. And why have I named it Kalam Bihar? Because it was former President APJ Abdul Kalam who made sure that when India sent Chandrayaan-3, it had a moon impact probe which goes down to near the south pole of the moon. No other country has ventured near the south pole of the moon. So if ever resources of the moon have to be shared, then India's flag is very close to where the water on the moon is.
Yes.
So it's an amazing beginning of a journey. I have loved every moment of it. I reported Chandrayaan-2, now Chandrayaan-3, and this journey is only going to become more and more exciting.
Absolutely. And we're all waiting for the 23rd of August, as you rightly mentioned there, when the tricolor will be put there, the selfies will come in. That's the time that the entire nation, in fact, for any mission of this nature, the entire world, keeps a close watch on that. So, Makre Chaudhary, I want you to break down some of the jargons, because for people to understand what this really means, it really needs to be simplified. So when we say that Vikram is going to make a soft landing, what does it essentially mean? And what happens post that, once it's on the lunar surface?
Well, if it makes a hard landing, it's destroyed, as it happened last time. A soft landing essentially means that it lands without significant damage to the lander itself and the instruments, but also it means that it can then release the rover, which will go and do a lot of other experiments on the lunar surface. Now, the instruments that are on the lander and the rover are all extremely interesting instruments, and many of them are quite pioneering. And the focus has now shifted, as you have seen, from the previous Chandrayaan missions, which predominantly looked for water. Now that the presence of water has been, shown quite unambiguously by Chandrayaan-2's orbiter instruments, one of the things is now to look at other things to do with water, where the water is, and how much water there is. And one of the reasons the south has been chosen is that the southern part of the moon has all these high mountains and deep craters where there's deep shadows, sun's light doesn't reach there. The temperatures can go down to -200 degrees, and there can be water in the form of ice. And these parts need to be explored, and one needs to figure out where they are. So that's one of the things that one will do. But the other things that the science that one is trying to do is to look at the characteristics of the surface of the moon, to look at moonquakes, so how much the moon has seismic activity. It's looking at the thermal structure of the rocks beneath the surface as well as on the surface. And it's also looking at the composition of the air and the atmosphere just on the surface of the moon. All this is geared towards, in the future, if one actually puts an establishment on the moon, as we will all have to, I think, and the moon will be a stage in our space exploration. It's one of the first stops, as it were. It's like the base camp before going on to the peak of Everest. So it's going to be, one will need to know exactly where we are setting up shop. It's also an exploration into uncharted territory in the southern part of the moon. But as an astrophysicist, I'm also excited by this, not because of the space exploration part of it, but also this helps us understand a lot about the composition of the moon. The moon and the Earth are sisters. They were formed at the same time from the same material. And some of the things that we cannot probe in the Earth because they're very deep in the Earth, in the soil and the rocks, can actually be found near the surface of the moon. And by studying the moon, we're essentially studying ourselves, the Earth, and origin of the Earth and the nature of the Earth. And as a scientist, that brings the moon very close to us, I mean, we've grown up with looking at Chanda Mama and stuff like that. We knew the moon is very close to us. One of the missions, I think, of this project is to figure out how close the moon is to the Earth in terms of its composition, in terms of its basic environment. We know that the absence of the atmosphere and the air makes it inhospitable, but in the end, eventually we'll have to go live there. Some people will have to go live there, and we'll have to understand the moon. So there are some really interesting things. And finally, I want to say there's one thing that nobody's mentioning, and that is the retroreflector. The early Apollo missions 50 years ago left these retroreflectors on the northern hemisphere of the moon. And these are mirrors from which we bounce lasers that are fired from the Earth, and the laser comes back. Okay. And by timing when it comes back, we can find an exact distance to the moon, and the moon's orbit is being charted by this. Now, in 50 years, nobody's left anything like that, and there are on the rover now we've sent retroreflectors that will go in the southern hemisphere of the moon, and that's a very, very interesting development because we want to understand the shape of the moon and also the moon's orbit, and having these reflectors on the other side of the moon is also a very interesting part, opens up another very interesting experiment. So scientific experiments, wonderful. Knowing about how the moon was formed, another thing, and of course, our first stage to space exploration. That just opens up a whole new world for us.
Well, absolutely, and as you mentioned, ever since we are little, we are shown the moon, Chanda Mama. It appears so endearing, but reaching Chanda Mama is so full of challenges. Dr. Amitabh Ghosh, since US is one of the 3 countries to have had a controlled landing on moon, are there any learnings from the process that countries like India have adopted, and do you believe that this time the mission is going to be successful?
So my answer to it is, this is just it's rigorous engineering. That's what it is. So I don't think you can directly quote from one mission to the other. So I think this is really rigorous engineering, and I think it's a hope that everything is done right, and it will be successful. So, but let me dwell on a broader picture. Why is this mission so important, or why is it in this part of the 21st century this is so important? So we are about to go from private government spaceflight to private spaceflight. So Elon Musk is testing Starship, which is going to cut the cost of spaceflight by 99% maybe, but at least by 90%. So if you think about it, you can go from one part of India to, say, the US, and it takes maybe 24 hours. 72 hours is probably the travel time to the moon on Starship. And people like Jeff Bezos, they're thinking, well, if we have a base out there, would people go for once in a life vacation? So suddenly, if you lower the cost of spaceflight, the moon becomes a lot more accessible. So, if you think of going to the US, it costs some money. If it costs thrice the money, would you go to the moon? So we are in this really exciting period, and in 10 years, you'll actually see Starship being successful in the next 1 year. And it will be part of the lander, which will land NASA astronauts on the moon in a couple of years. So we are at this very interesting time, and together with the launch of Artemis is the US mission to the moon to carry humans back. So it's a very interesting time to develop this capability. And as Dr. Rauchaudhary said, that this is something nearby where you develop capability before you go further. So I think to put this in context as to why, in terms of time, this is so exciting. If India joined the club and gotten involved, this is the new frontier. This is like going to America maybe 500 years ago. So this is the new frontier.
Okay. All right. We are really running short on time, I'm afraid. Dear Raghunandan, I want to understand from you that is it just our desire as humans to know about the universe, and that is why we try to reach the moon, or does it go way beyond that? What can it do for humankind?
From India's perspective, India's space program has been for a long time largely application oriented. We've put satellites into low Earth orbit. We have used that to do remote sensing, look for minerals in India, map our forests and agricultural produce. So we have used it to learn about our own country, use it for planning purposes. We have not really put in much money into curiosity-based science, exploration of space, because as a relatively poor developing country, we've not had the resources to do that. So we've put in money into applications. We are now moving into a phase with Chandrayaan, with Mangalyaan, where we are beginning to invest money in curiosity-driven science, in exploring space, etc. Where I think the question is not so much what can we learn in terms of how do I apply that knowledge and get some material benefit on a few decades ago, people always used to talk about, well, you know, the space program has given us Teflon, which we use in non-stick pans. It's a very expensive way of arriving at a simple technology. So I would look at what we get from this in terms of knowledge, rather than in terms of practical orientations. In fact, the practical orientations part give rise to some concern as far as I am concerned. The Indian space program recently, the space policy that we've announced, part of the Artemis program, all in some senses talk about the possibility of extracting resources from the moon, from asteroids, from other heavenly bodies. Now, that's not something that makes me particularly happy. We know the kind of problems we on planet Earth are facing due to rampant extractive industries and the problems with the environment. I would be very concerned if we start doing that to the moon and put up big mining industries there and so on. So I would, frankly speaking, be looking more at generating knowledge, knowing more about the science, and there is a lot of technology that we will get from doing this. Like the rockets that we are sending, it's a very different mode of space travel from what the Americans or the Russians have done. We've got low-powered rockets, and we are devising ways of using that to get to space. Hopefully, we'll develop more powerful rockets in the future, and our international collaborations will be such that I think India has developed very good low Earth orbit capabilities that will be very useful in the space station, etc. And we are gradually developing capabilities on the moon and perhaps tomorrow to reach Mars.
All right. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining us here on this discussion. We are taking a very quick break now.